Welcome to Breaking the Silence Mental Health Conversations with your hosts, Kim Olver and Dr. Richard Doss. Together, we'll break the silence and challenge the stigma by speaking now. So, take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's dive in. It's time to start the conversation.
Breaking the silence. Breaking the silence. Today, I thought we might have a conversation about moving from normal to healthy relationships. I work with a lot of people, a lot of couples, and I often ask the question, if your relationship was healthy, what would that look like? And they have no idea.
Wow.
You know, I've had couple after couple who have said, I've never been in a healthy relationship. So maybe today we can have a conversation that maybe put some parameters around what we think a good relationship is, what we think a healthy relationship is, and then as we talk about the normal relationships, is normal good? Is normal healthy?
Is it good enough?
And how do you know the difference? I think about one client that I worked with who was a survivor of domestic violence. And she looked me in the eye during session and said, Richard, all men beat women. And I was silent. She said, every man I've ever dated beat me. And in that moment, I was at a loss, and I had a feeling of just sorrow for the experiences that she must have had in her relationships. So as we go into this conversation today, the question becomes, what's normal? What's healthy? And how do we learn to tell the difference?
Yeah, I love that you wanted to talk about this topic because I don't know if you know this because we've been friends, but I don't think we were friends when I was working on my book, Secrets of Happy Couples, and I interviewed 100 happy couples.
Nice.
And to qualify for the interview, the couples had to have been together at least 10 years because, you know, everybody looks good in the beginning.
Right.
And then separately, they had to both tell me that they were happy in their relationship. And sadly, one would say they're happy and the other one would say, no, you better not use our interview. So of course I would still interview them because you wouldn't want the other person to know that their partner said we're not happy or they're not happy. So I did a lot of interviews that weren't gonna make the book, but I thought it would take 6 months to find 100 happy couples. It took me 2 years to get 100 happy couple interviews. And it was really sad to me because I felt like there's a lot of people out there who are going through their daily lives and they're living in, you're calling it normal relationships, and I called it mediocre relationships. It's good enough. I have no way of knowing if anything would be better. This is as good, maybe as good as it's going to get. So how do I make this work for me? And there's a time for that question to be asked. Maybe that is what you want to do. And maybe you want to understand what a great relationship looks like, and you can turn the one you have into a great relationship, or you can find a partner that could create a great relationship with you. Or you could keep living in the normal, mediocre relationship, because millions of people do that every day.
I wonder, where do we learn how to be in relationships? Especially men. Where do we learn to be in healthy relationships? I think about my grandfather, and the only requirement that he had to be a good man and a good husband was to be a good provider.
I knew.
Right. And so, yeah, so if is that true today, that as a boyfriend, as a husband, all I have to be is a good provider, or are other things required today that would make our relationship good or healthy?
Well, it's such an interesting question, because I'm sure that we could find women who would say, all I want is a man who will pay the bills, and they'll be happy with that person. But then there's other women who say, I can pay my own bills. I don't need a man to pay the bills. I need a man who will talk to me about how they feel, or who will spend quality time with me, or who will complete my honey-do list for me when I ask them to do it. So there's all kinds of qualifications, and men have their own expectations for the women in their relationships. And sometimes it's about, I'll be happy with a woman who's a lady in the street and a tiger in the bedroom. That's what they want. And if a woman can do that, the rest of it doesn't mean much. It's like, okay, can you cook? Oh, it doesn't really matter. As long as you give me what I want in the bedroom and you act like a lady in the street. So a healthy, happy relationship is very individual, is what I think. I think we need to look at each person individually and what their expectations are. And a lot of times those expectations aren't communicated. We're afraid to say what they are, because if we say what we want, we might be rejected. And then we have to start over again with someone else.
Here's another thing that I believe. So we talk about premarital counseling.
Yeah.
I think premarital counseling is a joke. And the reason that I think it's a joke,
Tell me how you really feel. Don't
really
hold
feel,
back.
Right? Premarital counseling is a joke, because oftentimes when people come for that type of counseling, they've already made their mind up that they want to get married. They've already sent out the invitations. They know what the cake is going to look like. They know who's been invited. They know where they're sitting.
And the wedding dress is being altered as they speak.
As you speak.
Right.
And so then the question becomes, if I have a serious conversation with you about the things that disturb me or concern me about your behavior, and you don't receive it well, does that jeopardize the wedding? And I think just the reality of it is, there are a lot of people, I think women in particular, who don't want to take the risk of jeopardizing the wedding.
Right, that's really true. Because there's an embarrassment about it. There's a fear about losing this person that they've invested so much time and energy into. It's a big deal, not to mention the financial aspects of canceling a wedding when all the deposits have been made.
Right.
You lose those deposits.
Right.
And you have to give back the wedding gifts. I mean, it's a big whole thing.
Here's the other thing that just kind of came to mind, is what happens when the biological clock starts ticking and you want a family? Is there pressure to go ahead and just make it happen so that you can have children? Or do you say, I'd rather be happy, or I'd rather be with the right person, right? Because the perfect person, I don't think really exists. Can I find the right person for me? And if I've only been in a few relationships, how do I know what that person looks like? I say, in your early 20s, watch this. It's really not about getting to know the other person. You're still trying to get to know yourself.
True story. And who you are at 20 is never going to be the same person you are at 30 or 40 or 50. So it's interesting, because I say the same thing. Back in biblical times, when people got married at 16 and died by 30, I could live with anybody for 14 years. That's not a hard thing to do. But when you get married at 30 in today's world and you live to be 90, that's 60 years. can two people live together in happiness and positivity in their relationship for 60 years? I think it's possible, and I think people do it, but I think those people are rare.
I think about the things that we learn, the things that we're taught. As I think about normal relationships, tell me if you've ever heard this statement before. Men will be men.
Of course. Boys will be boys is what I hear.
And so the idea that comes to mind for me is granddaddy used to cheat on grandma, dad cheated on mom, I'm a guy.
Right.
And so is it normal, okay, and accepted for us as men to cheat on the woman that we're with?
Normal. It depends on what you've been exposed to, right? Of course, that's normal if it's been what you've been exposed to. Doesn't mean it's going to help you have a healthy relationship.
Right.
But I also want to say it could be that it helps you have a healthy relationship. It's possible that having a extracurricular relationship is the thing that allows you to be a better husband to your full-time partner.
Is she talking about a side piece? Oh my God.
Well, I'm open-minded to the possibility, but what I believe is that it has to be what I've heard called ethical non-monogamy, which means everybody knows and everybody's in agreement.
So recently, I started seeing a couple, and I want to use the word couple loosely. I want to use the word couple loosely because there were three of them. Mm-hmm. There were three of them.
They're a thruple.
There's
a name.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a
they're
thruple.
a thruple.
All
Yeah.
right. All right. I've heard of
Amory.
Amory and being polyamorous,
Mm-hmm.
but a thruple.
Thruple.
A thruple. Okay, so you learn something new every day. That a thruple is a thing. Here was the interesting thing. He said, so it was a man and two women, and what he said was the problem that I have in this relationship is they don't trust me. I'm like, you with two women. And so again, what's normal? What's healthy? What's okay? If a man is cheating on a woman, but he treats her like a queen, and he's a good provider, maybe he even recently bought her a car, is that a relationship worth sticking it out? Is the idea sometimes that, yeah, he's cheating while we're dating.
But when we're married, he'll stop. Yeah, I don't co-sign that at all.
Right.
Right, because I believe in this concept I call unconditional trust.
I'm listening.
And it isn't that you trust people to be good people or to do the right thing. It's that you trust people to be the person they've shown you they are. So if you have someone, Maya Angelou said it, when people show you who you are, believe them the first time. So if your partner cheats on you when you're dating, it's reasonable to expect that they'll cheat on you when you're married. Not saying that it's guaranteed. They may have a different view of a husband than they do a boyfriend, but you can't bank on they're going to have a miraculous change just because you exchange wedding vows.
So watch this. In some relationships, cheating might be normal.
Yeah.
But watch this. One of the things that I think is important to have a healthy relationship is trust. And one of the things I want to be able to trust is that if we're in a monogamous relationship, that I'm the only person that you love, the only person that you're intimate with, the only person that you maybe are pouring out your soul to, you know, that we're kindred spirits, as opposed to I call you on a Wednesday to say I'm on my way over, and you say to me, you know Wednesday ain't your day, that I can only come over on Saturday because you're seeing somebody else. Yeah, so how do I, get to a point where I put trust as an important part of being in a healthy relationship? Do I always want to be checking your phone to see who left a message?
That's untenable, I think. That's not the kind, at least for me, that would not be a relationship that would be healthy if you're constantly checking on the other person. So if you know that trust and monogamy is something that you need in a relationship, then that's a non-negotiable for you. And I believe that when we have relationships, we do have non-negotiables, meaning if the person that you're with breaks that non-negotiable, that means the relationship is over. There's no fixing that. There's no working that out. That's a non-negotiable. You broke that. And I tell my couples, you shouldn't have more than 3 non-negotiables. If you have a list as long as your arm of non-negotiables in relationships, you don't want a relationship. You're trying to rule people out.
What do you think about the idea of a must-have list?
Well, that's a non-negotiable for me. Must have. I must have this. But when the list gets to be longer than 3 things, okay, you're being way too rigid, and you're likely trying to rule people out instead of rule them in. So to me, I would think you may be dealing with some issues of commitment phobia or an unwillingness to really commit to one person. You're trying to find ways to rule them out.
So do I have a good relationship if, I like your relationship and my relationship looks like your relationship? So is the goal to have, to fit an image of what a healthy relationship is or a normal relationship, or does it vary?
Well, I think it depends on individuals and what they think a healthy relationship is. Because our normal relationship is what we've been exposed to. Normal is what our parents had. It's normal for us because that's what we lived in, that's what we grew up in, that's what we saw. So that becomes our norm. Doesn't mean that we like it, doesn't mean that it's the best relationship we could conceive of, because we've been exposed to other things. We watch rom-coms, we see movies. That's the other thing that I think is really difficult, is when we see movies or read romance novels or watch even children's Disney movies from back in the day, we develop very unrealistic expectations of what a healthy relationship is. In those movies, books, well, check this. I had a client in a workshop I was doing called Women in Divorce. And there were 3 of us that were professionals that were helping women who were going through divorce. There was a finance person to help with the money. There was me, who was helping with emotions, and there was a legal person, a lawyer, who was helping with the legal aspect of divorce. And we always started with, we are not pro-divorce. Okay. We believe in marriage, we believe in working things out, and we're not anti-men. But we believed, and we saw over and over again, how men seem to always have the upper hand in divorce, where they knew what to do to hide their finances so their wives didn't get their...
She said men have the upper hand.
Well, that was our experience with our clients. Okay. And with finances and with lawyers. So we were trying to level that playing field, is what we were trying to do. I think women are more prepared emotionally, men less so. So it's not all men have the upper hand in every single thing. But there was a woman in my workshop who came to me afterwards to say she was going to divorce her husband. And I said, why are you getting divorced? And she said, well, my husband doesn't match what I want. And she told me that she reads at least 5 Harlequin romance books a week. And she's looking for the character that is portrayed in those the Harlequin romance novels. And I said to her, you do know that those are characters. They're not real people, right? Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Oh no, they're real. And she's looking for one of them. And she told me there's really nothing wrong with her husband. He's just not that. And I felt so sad for her husband, who obviously had no idea what was coming. And I think that's an extreme version of someone with unrealistic expectations. But I also think we expect someone to be like I'm going to say women, men may have the same thing, but women expect their husbands to be like their dads. If they had good relationship with their dad, that's what they want. But what's interesting, and this came out in my research with Secrets of Happy Couples, I had a lot of children, adult children of couples who said, oh, my parents are a happy couple, you need to interview them. And I would reach out to those parents and they would tell me, oh, we're not that. We put on a front in front of our children. So the person that you may think is your dad, or how your dad is in a relationship, or how your mom is in a relationship, is the person that they want you to see, not necessarily their authentic selves and who they are behind closed doors. And so if you're looking at that as the normal bar, you are having, again, unrealistic expectations of your partner, expecting them to live up to an ideal that doesn't really exist in reality.
So watch this. If women look for a partner that's going to meet the ideal of their father, I'm wondering if men look for the woman that's going to meet the ideal of the woman in that pornographic movie that he watched.
I think sometimes that happens. Yeah,
Right.
That's where the tiger in the bedroom comes from.
Right.
But they don't want him to act like that at church or in the street or at work,
Right.
only
Right.
with them.
Right. Every now and then, people looking for a freak of nature. Whereas we should be looking for somebody. Right. So, honestly, here's what people, we all have a type. Watch this. We want a woman that has a certain derriere. We want a woman that has a certain texture of breast, a certain color hair, a certain length of hair. Oh, look at her eyes, look at her lips. And guys have these conversations.
Men tend to be quite visual, more so than women.
And so then the question becomes, who teaches a man that you shouldn't be looking for a partner, definitely not a marital partner, based on what they look like, what they smell like, but maybe based on their character and their personality and who they are and how well they fit, watch this, the person that you are.
That fit is really important. It's extremely important because the person that would fit you is not going to fit your friend or your brother or someone else. It's looking for the person that's going to fit you. And I also want to say, don't downplay the physical aspect of the relationship, because having someone that you find attractive is important in a relationship as well. Maybe more important for some people than for others, but that is an aspect of the overall person.
What can I tell you about a cousin of mine, and he shall remain unnamed. As he was looking for his wife, he said that he wanted to marry an ugly woman so that she wouldn't cheat on him.
I had another man I know quite well say the same to me.
And you know what that ugly woman did?
Cheated on him?
She cheated on him.
Oh, man.
Right. And so, so it's tricks that we play with ourselves. And sometimes we just get misdirected, misguided. All right. One of the things that, I often ask, if I come from a dysfunctional family and I meet you and we start dating and you come from a dysfunctional family, the question then becomes, what kind of family are we about to create?
I would say 80-20, you're going to create a dysfunctional family, but there is the possibility that you could beat the odds and create a functional family. But
so do we take a class? Do most people go to marital counseling?
Of course not. Of course not. Because most people believe they've got it covered. Because if you're about to get married, that is probably the best time in your relationship thus far. You've made this commitment, you're giddy with the idea of having a partner for the rest of your life. Women are feeling secure in that relationship. Men are feeling that they have this available to them always sexual partner, which is something that they're looking for. And so they're excited and happy about this upcoming union. And from there, there is, of course, they call it a honeymoon period for a reason. There's a honeymoon period where I talk about sex and romance are at an all-time high. Both of you are getting all the sex and all the romance you could possibly want. And then life happens and it impacts the relationship. One of you is not going to feel like being romantic or feel like being sexual.
Hush your mouth.
It's going to happen. It's inevitable. And then when that happens, the other person is going to pull back in the opposite direction. So if we're in a relationship and you decide one night you're not feeling very romantic and you just want to, let's just get it on, baby. And I'm like, hey, I don't want to do that without a little, warming up first,
right.
And you're not willing to warm me up. So now I'm not feeling very sexual. So nothing happens that night. And it's okay the first couple of times that happens. But then it just starts to become this downward spiral where we aren't getting the sex and romance we were accustomed to in our dating life or in that honeymoon period. And we just keep pulling back and pulling back and pulling back. And then when let's say I'm looking for more romance, what I do is I become more romantic with you, which you may perceive as a tease because I'm not being sexual with you, but I'll come and sit on your lap and I'll rub up against you and I'll kiss you, but I'm not interested in doing the deed, then that is not going to feel very romantic to you. And if you aren't getting the sex you want, you might want sex with me. You're not feeling romantic, so you want to throw me up on the kitchen counter and go at it, and it's like, whoa, no way.
I had a client. I asked, how do you make love to a woman? And really the conversation was about intimacy, affection, and romance. Mm-hmm. I asked, how do you make love to a woman? His words, and this was an older gentleman, he said, you have to stand up in it. And I thought to myself, is that what a woman wants? Or does a woman want to be loved and caressed? Does she want affection? Does she want respect and kindness, compassion and consideration? Or does she want a man that just stand up in it? And where do you even learn that?
Well, I think there may be women that just want that. Okay. So this man needs to find one of those women. But I think they're few and further between.
So you're saying all women are not created equal?
That is true. We're not all the same. But we do have some trends that we have in common. Not every single woman, but like I say, there may be women who appreciate that. There may be women who are busy women who just think, let's just do the thing and let me get on with what I'm involved in, right? Let's just do it. And that would be fine. If he can find a woman like that, then that could be their excellent, happy relationship. It's about finding the right partner for you.
So is it healthy to build a relationship based on good sex?
It can be healthy to build a relationship based on good sex if good sex is the priority for both of those people.
Right. So here is where I see that one getting tricky.
Oh, it's all tricky.
Right. So I get older. So, you know, you're talking about a 20, 30-year-old man and his willingness and ability to have sex. He wants to have sex every day, all day. But then 50, 60, 70, or he gets diabetes, or he gets high blood pressure, or he starts to have cardiovascular problems, and he gets this thing called erectile dysfunction. Watch this. If he's built his relationship on sex, and now he can't have sex the way that he used to, the question then becomes, what happens to the relationship?
Well, my answer to that is they go get counseling and they talk to counselors about other ways to be intimate and sexual with one another that don't involve intercourse.
Do you think most men know
No,
about intimacy?
no, I don't, sadly. And I think that many women equally don't know about the benefits of being sexual.
Yeah, because I know men who think that intimacy is sex. I can think of one client who felt like this: if intimacy is sex, then everything we do is leading up to sex. So if we hold hands, that's leading up to sex. If you caress me, that's leading up to sex. If we kiss, that's leading up to sex. Now, once he got erectile dysfunction, he didn't want his wife to touch him, kiss him, caress him, because he was afraid that he wasn't going to be able to perform sexually. So he kept her at an arm's length.
Which is heartbreaking for him and for her. And that's why I think having these kind of conversations could really help people like that, because it would be very useful for that man to understand that there are other ways to satisfy a woman other than sex, and there's other ways other than intercourse, and there's other ways for him to be satisfied other than intercourse, if he's willing to have those conversations and if he's willing to be vulnerable. Because for a woman, or at least for this woman, I don't equate sex and intimacy. I think intimacy is vulnerability. And sex can be very vulnerable, but it can also be just sex with no vulnerability at all. Like that get up in it, that's, or stand up in it. That's not intimacy. That's let's, wham bam, thank you ma'am is what that is. There's no emotion involved in that. So teaching a person with erectile dysfunction other ways to experience intimacy could be very useful if they're willing to open themselves up to be vulnerable, because you can't do that without vulnerability, especially when you have the patterns of what normal relationships are like.
Yeah, so, then I start thinking, is sex about performing in the bedroom, or is it more than that? Because if the last time he couldn't get erect, now the anxiety that he's feeling
make it even harder.
Is going
no
to make
pun
it,
intended.
right, right. It's going to make it harder to perform, to become erect, to want to be intimate. Yeah. So, man, does your ego, as you think about healthy sexual relationships, does your ego have a place in the bedroom?
Of course it has a place, because you bring your ego with you.
Okay.
I don't know how you get rid of that. But I think that you can think differently about it so that your ego isn't as front and foremost. It would become more about sharing with your partner in a physical expression of your love for one another. And that's what happens in the bedroom. If it can't be intercourse, what else could it be? And are you willing to engage in that kind of exploration? And do you want to satisfy your partner, even if you can't do it the way that you've always done it? Are you willing to adjust that?
And so, I asked the guy the question, how do you love a woman?
Mm-hmm.
And, now it makes me think about the 5 love languages.
Yeah.
Do you think most men and women know how they want to be loved? And then do you think they have a good sense of how their partner wants to be loved?
Well, I think most in today's world, I think it's hard to find people who've never heard of the 5 love languages. At least in the audiences that I talk to, I'm sure there's people who don't know about it. But if you're at home and you're listening to us and you don't know about the 5 love languages, I would go to the website, the number 5, lovelanguages.com, and there's a quiz there that you can take, and it will tell you which is your predominant love language. And when you know your predominant love language and you learn your partner's, the idea is for you to become bilingual. If your partner and you share the same love language, that's a beautiful thing. You probably have a great relationship, loving each other in a way that you both understand. But if my love language is different from your love language and we're in a relationship, it's likely that I'm trying to love you from my perspective and what love feels like to me, and you're doing the same. It's what happened in my relationship with my husband. I'm a quality time girl. He's an acts of service guy. So when he was coaching our kids after school in one of their athletic teams and I'd get off of work, I would go to where they were so I could hang out with them and be with them. And,
right.
That's quality time for me. And he would look at me and say, "Why aren't you home cooking dinner?" Because that was his love language. "Why don't you go home and make us dinner?" That's acts of service. And it hurt me because I felt like, don't you want me to be with you? Because to me, that was my love language, but he didn't understand that, nor did I understand his. I knew nothing about love languages then. Then my husband became sick, and he was 6 months in a hospital after a bone marrow transplant, and every day I was performing acts of service for him, personal care things that when you say in your marriage vows for better or worse, in sickness and in health, you don't really imagine the things that I was doing as part of that.
Right.
But I was performing these acts of service, and he looked at me one day and he said, "You really do love me, don't you?" And now that I understand the 5 love languages, I know why he came to that realization, because I was actually loving him the way that felt like love to him. So I do think that there's many couples out there who don't know their love language, don't know their partners, haven't put in the time, energy, and effort to learn that second language, and then maybe aren't even motivated to speak it for their partner. Because if I'm mad at you, why would I want to speak your love language? Because I'm not feeling very loving towards you. So it can be an upward spiral or it can be a downward spiral depending on your motivation.
Yeah, and so then how do we have conversations if you're not getting what you need and I'm not getting what I need? So, sometimes I'll ask the trick question. So do you go off on your partner and tell them how you really feel? Or do you say nothing so that you can keep the peace? So what I'd say is that both of those things are unhealthy. The healthy option is one that we don't actually talk about often, and it's called assertiveness. How do I speak up for myself in a way that's respectful? So being non-assertive or passive is saying nothing when things are happening that you don't like. Being aggressive, you're speaking up for yourself. Watch this. But now you're also being disrespectful. Right? So how do I venture out to say something assertive to somebody that I love, that I care about, that I'm in a relationship with, without it becoming something that could jeopardize our relationship, or something that makes my partner angry? Or do I have any control over that?
I love that question. Do you think that's a question we could talk about next time and really dive into that?
You want to go there? Okay.
I do. I really, really do.
Sounds good. So we have had an amazing conversation. Thank you, Kim. An amazing conversation. Moving from normal to healthy relationships. We only scratched the surface today. And I mean, I think there's some deep dives left for us to take. We want to thank you for tuning in to Breaking the Silence, to beginning to have these conversations about mental health, about relationships, about who we are, and understanding our partners. My name is Dr. Richard Doss. This is Kim Olver. We appreciate you guys.
I just want to say, if you have any topics or areas that you would like Richard and I to focus on in future videos, just drop a comment here. Send us an email at the address that's on the screen.